Hey folks, it's Patriot Nurse. Thanks for joining me. Today we're going to be discussing the sham trial of President Trump and how we go forward from this as a country and what this means if we have any possible expectation of a fix on the part of the federal government. Let's get started. So I've been sitting on this one for a while, and I've been mulling over a lot of different things. And unfortunately, this is going to be a pretty somber video. I say unfortunately because it's sad that a republic such as ours should have come to the end of the line so quickly. Although you do see that throughout history, about 250 years is the shelf life of republics, and we've exceeded our usefulness as far as that's concerned. But I think, friends, we're going to have to rip the Band-Aid off sooner or later. And part of that process involves being honest with how we got here and what we do going forward. Even if people show up in November and pull the lever for Trump, which I hope that people do, not necessarily because I'm the biggest fan of President Trump. Certainly in his first term, I think that he was pretty weak on the Second Amendment, bump stock ban et al. And I think he could have done a better job. But the bottom line is they crucified this man. And if they can do it to him, they can do it to anyone. And this is the point, the take home, that we have come to a place in a timeline in our republic where these evil people in DC have gotten so entrenched in power that now they are willing to weaponize at every possible level and conspire at every possible level to deny the American citizens the candidate that they want to run from office from showing up on the ballot. By hook or by crook, they will do whatever it takes to remain in power. So I got to thinking about this. Is another election going to fix this? No, it won't. It might buy some more time. But the issue is, okay, let's say that President Trump gets in office. Then what? Unless he does, I certainly hope that he does, but unless he does anything short of erasing every department that weaponizes the federal government's arms, its tentacles against the American people, unless he abolishes the IRS, unless he destroys the Department of Justice and completely just levels it, the Department of Education, Department of Energy, unless 90% roughly of federal programs and powers are cut off, this is still going to keep on its slide towards totalitarianism. So what do we do about this? I was thinking about a scene from one of my favorite movie series and books, Lord of the Rings. And it's in The Return of the King. It's where Eowyn runs under these big orliphants, these elephants, these battle elephants. And she has one of the hobbits, of course, the little ones, hold the reins. And she takes swords out and she just cuts the legs of this ginormous beast. So I got to thinking about it. How are we to cut off the legs of this beast? How are we to destroy its propulsion mechanism? Because really, elections are not going to do that. Another series of elections is not going to do this. What is the propulsion mechanism for this beast that is the federal government? The answer is income tax. Now, people have speculated that eventually a tax revolt would take place when people realize that what they're doing by paying taxes is weaving the rope that the feds are going to use to hang the American populace. They are already doing so. The American populace is already being strangled by these people with oppressive taxation, with all the money that flows into programs like CPS and DCS, which of course are state-based programs, but they ultimately are used to kidnap children away from their parents. Your tax dollars pay for that. President Trump was prosecuted with taxpayer dollars. His own money to field a defense for himself was no comparison with the tax dollars that have been extorted from us in order to pay for the torture that man has endured. And again, if they'll do it to him, they'll do it to anybody. So the question is, why are we propelling this beast? And why are we weaving so willingly the rope to hang ourselves? Because there is, hitherto this point, no better option. But there's a key point that I'd like to bring up here. People talk about preparedness. And this is important, beans, bullets, and band-aids. There are practical levels of preparedness for everything from natural disasters to government-mitigated disasters to breakdown and rule of law. But I'd say at this point, it's obvious to me that the height of lawlessness is happening not outside of the government, but within the government. We have complete breakdown inside the government, at the federal level, down from the rule of law. What we've been preparing for is here. The thing is, most people recognize, if they're doing any type of cogitating on it, that the income tax is part of this. Ever since 1913, going forward, the two things, the income tax and the Federal Reserve System, they have been incestuously dovetailed to get us into foreign wars, to expand the power of the federal government, to increase the amount of people who are employed on its payrolls. Basically, it's sycophants. And to keep the hamster on the wheel. So how do we cut off the legs of the elephant? And how do we starve the beast of its propulsion mechanism? They have to stop being fed our tax dollars. But the disincentives for this are numerous and replete. What can they do? What can the feds do to enforce compliance on this? Number one, they can freeze your assets if they're in their grid. We're going to come back to this. Number two, they can revoke your passport if you fail to pay taxes. And they can prevent you from leaving the United States if you are solely if you are the sole holder, you don't own a passport, if you solely hold a United States passport. If you only have citizenship in the United States, they can lock you down and keep you from moving. And also, they can essentially declare you a tax criminal, and they can bring you up on charges. If you go into their custody, Jeffrey Epstein shows us what happens when you go into custody. So there's not too many great options for people, up until recently. And the point that I want to make here is something that's probably not going to be particularly tasty to a group of people in a particular generation, but it needs to be said. The first duty of people who want to fight back against a rogue federal government is to divest from fiat currency. Now, United States dollars are fiat currency. People would say, okay, well, gold. Nope, that's part of it. But gold can be seized as well. It has been seized. FDR did it. There is an option that people have that they're very hesitant to embrace, and that is cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, effectively. Bitcoin is designed to be resilient. It is designed to be very difficult for those people to get their hands on. It's not impossible. They've done it. They did it to Roswell Brick and Silk Road. But the barriers for the feds freezing your assets and taking your assets for non-compliance are far higher than, for instance, saving up money and keeping it in cash in your bank or investment accounts. Now, I'm not giving financial advice. I'm just looking at this current situation through the lens of history. If we want this to stop, you have to cut the legs of the beast. The legs of the beast, income tax. But even if you can't bring yourself, like many people, to cease paying income tax because of fear of reprisal, and I understand it, then at the bare minimum, we can stop transacting in their currency. And the way that we stop transacting in their currency is to use a different one. And personally, for me, that has manifested in increasing my holdings personally of cryptocurrencies, namely Bitcoin. And I see this as ultimately the way of the future. And not the way of the future because it's the cool tech thing. There is no better option to break these people, friends. There certainly is no peaceful option to break them. You're not going to vote them out. You're not going to vote their power out. And the situation in Washington being what it is, we know what these people are about. They're about perpetuating their own power. We have no power as long as their bills keep getting paid. They have no power if their lights get turned off. They have no power if their bills don't get paid. They have no power as long as their agents, if they keep showing up to work, as long as they are more compelled to show up to work than they are afraid to go to work, this is going to keep on going. But the money is the crux of this issue. The money is the center of the problem. And even if you're not someone who is interested in cryptocurrency, even if you're not someone who's down for that, let me just ask you to think about something. What better option do you have? Do you think we're going to go back to a prehistoric barter system? Nope, it's not going to work. You may be able to work on it short term, but the economy, in order for our economy to cease being that of a war machine, to cease being that of an oppressive machine, it's not going to somehow revert back to bartering in perpetuity. That's a pipe dream. The way that we break this machine is to stop transacting in their currency, even if it's little bit by little bit, right? Little bit by little bit. Ultimately, I think people are first going to unhook from using the dollar, and then they'll have enough courage once their assets are outside of the reach of their grid, meaning the banking system. Once their assets are outside of the reach of the banking system, then they'll have the courage to not pay taxes. And until then, it's just wishful thinking. But if they'll do all this to President Trump, if they will manufacture all of these charges, if they will conduct themselves in the way that they did, they'll do it to anybody. Which then it begs the question, what incentive do you have to comply with them? What incentive do any of us have to follow any of their dictates and rules? Ultimately, it comes right down to the fact that this is an illegitimate government. And ultimately, when you think about no taxation without representation, what is the ultimate taxation that we're experiencing right now? Inflation. They will keep inflating this currency. That is a taxation on future generations. My generation will never see Social Security. We are paying taxes for things which we will never recoup. So if we know that we're being stolen from, we know that people are unlawfully being locked up, unlawfully being charged, unlawfully having their children taken away from them. This is a vehicle of evil in the United States, and the feds are the center of it, but they function on the dollar. And as long as the dollar has dominance, they will continue to oppress people. So if you want your first step of rebellion against this system in a practical way, if you got your beans, bullets, and band-aids checked off, you may want to consider doing some research on Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in general and how they work. Regardless of how you think of things, you don't have any better options, and you're not just going to go away and sit on a stockpile. This is not going to be a comfortable transition. The question is, are we going to be willing to be uncomfortable to fix things? If people are not willing to get off their duffs and go train, they're not willing to take some, 500, 1,000 rounds off of their stockpile to go and train. If they're not willing to do that, what are they willing to do? What are you willing to do? And I'm asking this as a general question. What are you willing to do? What are you willing to do to break this thing right now so that it stops oppressing people and hurting people and dragging people into courts unnecessarily, taking people's children away unnecessarily, medical kidnapping? Every single woe in this country is because the dollar is their power. And until the dollar is taken down and until people shift their mindset away from transacting in their currency, every dollar that we are transacting, friends, is the rope we are weaving to give them to hang us with. Now, I'm not espousing to be perfect in this. We don't have to be perfect. All we have to do is to make progress. And that progress is to use their dollars less and less. They're not our dollars, they're theirs. Since when have we had any type of control over the money supply? We haven't. So until this thing is broken, until their dollars are taken away, they're going to continue to oppress people. So by all means, show up to the polls in November and pull the lever for President Trump. But until then, let's look at what fueled the problems that have led us to this point. You take out their money, you take out their dollar, you stop using their dollar, solution will right itself much quicker. Our nation is in a free fall. The growth economically and jobs, it didn't go to native-born Americans. It went to all these illegals coming in. The growth was in non-farm, unskilled labor. Who do you think fills that? It's not the people who were born here. No. We are paying taxes to be enslaved right now. And you don't have to have a perfect answer for everything. But even if your act of rebellion is your first purchase of crypto, or your act of rebellion is taking money and putting it somewhere else, taking it from fiat and putting it into some type of tangible asset, then that's your act of rebellion. But the more that we comply and the more that we facilitate their reprisal against us, the less likely this thing ever is to be fixed. And at this point, when it is fixed, it's going to be really nasty. But what are we going to do in the meantime? Prepare. Beans, bullets, and band-aids are part of this. The beans, of course, they're going to try and starve us out one way or another. They're effectively doing that with inflation. They're using inflation to starve people out right now. When you go to the grocery store, how much money are you spending to buy the same thing that you would have bought for a third of the price, or 2/3 of the price 3 years ago? Bullets. They're going to try and disarm people. They're going to try and find ways to make firearms ownership more difficult for people. They're going to try and find ways to make defending your family something that is criminal even to think of. to disincentivize it. So part of the reason why we have stockpiles of ammunition is to go and train with it. To be ungovernable and to be fierce and to make them more afraid of showing up to enforce these evil edicts than doing their job. That's the only way it stops. And then the Band-Aids. If you are a parent, you know that the last place you want to take your child to is unfortunately, is the ER or potentially a pediatrician who's unfriendly. Why is that? Because they will manufacture reasons to steal your children from you now. Medical kidnapping is very real. And they have to essentially have nothing in order to steal your children from you. And the burden on you to get them back is bankruptcy for legal counsel and trying to prove your innocence. Where is the Fourth Amendment in that? If you value your health, you got to learn how to give it to yourself and your family without having to go and consult with these people. I was made aware of recently, actually the chiropractor that I visit shared with me a story that a family in this chiropractor's acquaintance had left the hospital after the birth of their child, and it's normal for babies to lose a little bit of weight in the first week, but they didn't want to transfer their child to a NICU effectively. They wanted to manage the child's care at home and have the pediatrician see them. DCS showed up at their door. Overweight issues. They love stealing children. So how do you shield yourself and your family against these people? Don't go into their grid. Everything that we've talked about in this video involves not going into their grid. I'm very serious about this. If the justice in this country has been contorted to convicting President Trump of things that were beyond statute of limitations that had to be redefined with convoluted jury instructions in order to get it done, like, do you think they're going to have any justice for you in that same system? Are you kidding me? Think about how much money that man had to fork over to defend himself, and still they found a way to declare him guilty. What possible expectation do you and I have in a similar system for a just outcome? There is none. There is none. So don't go into their grid. Don't transact with their money. Don't need their services. Be ungovernable. Until we become ungovernable, they will continue to do this. So a lot of people that I've talked to have either left the country, and no, I don't think they're unpatriotic for doing so. How could you say that, Patriot Nurse? Because they're allegiant to principle. Our founders were allegiant to principle, and our founders left their original country because they were allegiant to their principle. They followed truth, they followed principle, not a flag and not a nation. They were about what is God's law. So people are leaving the United States. We're going to continue to have a brain drain. And we're going to continue to see the evacuation of capital, not just in human capital, but also in real capital, as people are like, forget it. I'm switching over to cryptocurrency. Peace out. I'm not dealing with your grid. I'm gone. In order for us to make any type of change, we're going to have to make uncomfortable changes in our own lives. And it trickles up. Their tyranny trickles down. Our resistance trickles up. And as more and more people cease having anything left to lose, or have become more shielded and defended against their retaliatory efforts, until things become at a tipping point, none of this is going to change. But until then, we can continue doing what we know we need to do. Part of why I have done and labored over the past decade of my life, part of why I've done what I've done and put videos up online, is because I've seen this day coming. A lot of us have. And unfortunately, like many of you, being a student of history, you know that these things don't write themselves peacefully most of the time. So it's going to be dirty and it's going to be nasty, and I'm going to be ready for it. Even if President Trump gets in office, if he does anything less than a radical castration of federal power within the scope of his capability, it's going to be just as bad 4 years later. Until we starve them out, they're going to continue to destroy us. That's what I have for y'all. Hope the video was helpful for y'all today. If you did enjoy it, please subscribe to me here. Please share this video. If it resonated with you, please share the video. If you want to train with me, you can train with me in person I've got one block of teaching available this year in Knoxville, Tennessee. You can take either 4 days or you can take the full 7 days that I offer. The Medical Prep 101, 201, and 301, and then I also teach nutrition, herbs, and old school disease as part of that equation. And then additional to that, the second week, I'm teaching the herbal preparedness class. And so the Herbal Theory and Prep class, friends, is designed to equip you to take care of your family's health and support needs outside of needing to buy conventional things at the pharmacy. I want you to be able to use and work with familiarity the plants in nature as our ancestors did. The less dependent we are, the more capable we are of mounting an effective defense and ultimately of resisting their onslaught. You can't do this if you're lacking will. You can't do this if you're dependent. We're all dependent in some way, shape, or form, but the degree of dependency in order for us to throw off their chains has got to be radically, radically decreased. We do this with education. Encourage other people around you to educate themselves as well. And whatever it is that their gifting is, their God gifting. Every single person has some type of inclination. Let's say, for instance, that you have a desire to be a pilot, or that for whatever reason is interesting to you, and nobody else you know knows how to fly a plane. There you go. Let's say that you have a proclivity towards medicine and you like to prepare things, or you're interested about the plants. That's your avenue. Let's say that you're into finance and you've heard about crypto, but you're not exactly sure. There it is. And I'll put some links in the description box below for some interesting podcasts and things to listen to so that you can start your journey of educating yourself. Friends, we got to get ready for this, and it's not going to be in the same way. It's not going to take the same manifestation of things before the internet age. We are in a completely different age. The principles are the same. The technology is different. The principles of no taxation without representation, that is still true, but the methods through which we accomplish this turning around of things, it's a different method. The technology changes, the principles are the same. We need to be ready for when our time is here. For now, it's Patriot Nurse signing off, and I'll see y'all later.